speak to you really at a very curious time and going on. We could talk about technology, we can talk about editing, we can talk about photography. There's so many areas of filmmaking that you could have a whole afternoon just talking about writing. So I want to start with you to think about the questions in any of those fields that you wish to talk about, that in some ways what we used to call television and what we call movies or film, which ironically was called film because it was celluloid film, but which we call cinema, how are those two fields in a way united? And what might we look to the future of the fact that television and movies are really both forms of cinema, and television is now teaching us things that we can learn about. For so many years, television learned from cinema, and now maybe the other. Is that a good restatement of what you asked?
Much clearer than what I said.
Does anyone need any translation in Spanish? Okay, good. Well, this is a really interesting subject. As I said, every one of these, we could talk about screenwriting or this or that, and we could talk for 2 hours about it. So shut me up if I talk too much about this. Interestingly enough, most people realize that television, which used to be called electric vision, really was invented maybe 30 years before the motion picture, courtesy of Edison and the Lumiere brothers, etc. In other words, there was a phenomenon of electric vision, which is television, first mechanical and then electronic, which ultimately it became. And it would have been possible for television to have been born to the mass public 40 years before movies were. That was a technical possibility. It didn't happen. Now, what happened was television, being that there was a difference of opinion as to whether it could be mechanical television or this new thing, which was electronic television by courtesy of the cathode ray tube and electronic developments that were based for oscilloscopes and the idea of shooting electrons out of phosphorescent screens. Because of this quandary between whether it would be mechanical, and it did exist early on as a mechanical form, but it never really took flight. So cinema became publicized, became given to the public before television. Therefore, when television finally did reach it to the public, generally speaking after World War II, although it existed in England and even in Nazi Germany, they had electronic television during World War II. But generally, the world got television after World War II, which is 40, 50 years after movies were already out. Therefore, television adopted the technology, the language that had been invented for cinema, and it was applied to television. So it's very interesting to imagine what would have happened had television come out first, and it made the rules, which would have been copied by cinema. Now, when cinema was invented, as you know, it began as a peep show amusement. People would look at a little hoochie cooch dance or a funny comedy of a kid holding his foot on the hose and taking it off, and the owner would get squirted in the face. But they were little 3-minute amusements. And eventually the public was so enthralled with moving pictures. And don't forget, the photograph itself, the actual photograph, had only been invented 50 years before. I mean, you look at the earliest pictures, you see Abraham Lincoln or pictures from the American Civil War, because that's when photography began. So this is recent, all this stuff. I mean, you don't see a photograph of Simón Bolívar. Imagine how beautiful that would be to have the real Simón Bolívar, who was very handsome and very short and truly a great man. You were so lucky to have had Simón Bolívar, really, I think. So, yeah, let's have a hand for Simón Bolívar. So these movies, the producers saw they could make money, so they said to the filmmakers, our pioneers, go out and make us a 20-minute movie, whatever that is. So experimentation was allowed and encouraged because the money didn't say, go make a movie exactly like Spider-Man 2. They said, do whatever you can that the people will like. And these pioneers in cinema didn't know how to make a movie. They had theater, they knew what a theater might be like, but they came up with such extraordinary ideas as the close-up. Who could have thought of the close-up? Because we all know in a play, you see the play and you see it all. But the idea that how did they know that if they suddenly went and showed you that the audience would say, why are they showing me that? The audience would say, oh, I get to see what she's thinking, what she's feeling. Well, who would have thought that if you took a shot of the bad guys tying a lady to the railroad track and then cut illogically to a speeding locomotive, who would have thought that the audience in their mind would put that together and say, oh, that girl is in danger, the locomotive is going to kill her. Parallel action. So these pioneers, to whom we owe a great debt, invented a language unique to cinema, the language of shot juxtaposition, that this shot connected with this shot made an emotion in the audience that the audience felt. So it only came because they were allowed to experiment. Today, in your generation, those of you who want to be filmmakers, you're not allowed to experiment. If you want to get money for a film, you have to show them that the film will not experiment. So the most important part of cinema, which is to learn how it works, and believe me, only 10% we know how it works. There's another 90% you're going to discover, and your grandchildren are going to discover, and their children are going to discover. If I could see the movies that your great-grandchildren are going to be making, I would be so grateful because I know it's nothing like what we've ever seen before. There's that much room in this medium to see if you're allowed to experiment. But how can we experiment when they say, okay, go out, you want to make the film, tell me that it's going to be just like what we already know, so there's no risk. Because finance does not want risk. Art wants risk. Finance doesn't want risk. So this is the dilemma. We want to be like the movie makers of the turn of the century who go out and invent the language, because there's still more of the language that could be invented. Now, very interesting, in the last 10 or 12 years, the cinema has changed how it's made. It's no longer photochemical on celluloid. It's no longer edited by cutting and gluing together shots. It's edited in a digital medium. And now, sound, of course, has been digital for some time. But now the picture itself, the quality of the projector probably in this theater is beyond what even film, that glorious phenomenon of film, which reached the apogee of its development 30 years ago, now the digital image is even beginning to surpass that. So this means that our medium now is a wholly digital medium. Yet, we as filmmakers love so much the classical cinema made by those people we all admire, by all those filmmakers you love. We want to make films like them. I wanted to make films like Fellini. I wanted to make films like Rossellini. I wanted to make films like William Wyler. I wanted to make films like Stanley Kubrick. I wanted to make films like John Frankenheimer. I wanted to make films like Orson Welles. So that's the problem. We love the great heritage so much that in a way it limits us, because now as a digital medium, it can do anything way beyond what the old photochemical. It's as though we now have a technology to build cars, little cars that could drive around like Ferraris and fast and stuff, and can also fly. But we keep them on the ground because we love the old Ferrari so much, we don't want to have a car that can fly. We love our old movies so much that we want to make movies like Jean-Luc Godard, or we want to make movies like whomever, like George Lucas or Martin Scorsese. That's a good, or Steven. That's a good goal. Those are beautiful movies. But the cinema has changed, and it can do much more that our great forebears couldn't do because it didn't have the magical capability of the digital format. And that's an area I'm very interested in, even as an old guy, because of among the many things the new digital cinema could do, which you know better than I, and probably have some good ideas, I know as an ex-theater guy that it is possible to make a film that is a film, not a live television show, not a sexy telenovela, or even the great live television film of the Playhouse 90s era of the 50s when the great John Frankenheimer was making them. That I know that you know, when you turn on the television, you see all the stuff, live television, this and that. When a movie comes on, how long does it take you to know it's a movie? A second? Just to look at it, you know that's a movie, that's not television, that's cinema. Why? It's lit differently, it looks different, it behaves different, there are shots, it's shot-based, there are beautiful shots that connect with other shots, whereas television is really a setup shot with zoom lenses doing coverage. Coverage is not the same as shots. Shots are designed and work by their juxtaposition to create emotions. You put A combined with B and you get an emotion that's C. So I know that I could make a film that would look like cinema to the audience, but it's coming to you live on this screen and you're looking at a film, but the actors are doing it in that moment. I think I know how to do that. Whether that's worth it, why? My wife says, why would you want to do that? Then you have to have all that burden, you have to work it all out. If you cut it, you can choose the best takes, you can get it perfect. And I say, yeah, sure, but it's still canned art. All our art today is canned. The only thing that we have that's not canned is sports. It's the only thing that when it's going on, no one knows what's going to happen. Is there going to be a goal? Is there not going to be a goal? Is it going to be a hit or not a hit? Only sports is really live. And what I'm saying is the concept of performance, to really see all of these actors and technicians doing something collaboratively together right in front of your eyes, that moment, with all the risk that entails. And you see it, it's like a bullfight. If anyone has ever seen a bullfight, when it achieves the bullfight's ultimate goal, when you're witnessing something that's perfection, it's almost a ceremony, you never forget it your whole life. If you go to the opening night of Streetcar Named Desire, that first night it opened, you will never forget that the rest of your life. Is it the same as a cinema? Well, I will never forget my reaction of going to Lawrence, Arabia, but imagine if you could see a Martin Scorsese film coming to you that he worked on and everyone worked on, and they're doing it as a performance for you. Cinema, not television, in front of a screen, you would never forget it your whole life. So that is that's the Francis version of one little thing that the old digital cinema can now do that it couldn't do before. And I'm sure there are many others. There's related to gaming or film artists working across continents on collaborating on cinema being done, and things that you'll tell me. So that's sort of my answer to your question, how you choose your actors. Well, first of all, one bad thing that's been happening lately, as I have witnessed, is that the process of casting, which goes back thousands of years, remember that cinema is a descendant of theater, and theater has existed among human beings for thousands of years in not only the great tradition of the Greek theater. So the question of casting has always been an issue. Today, I noticed that filmmakers rely on their casting director, and the casting director interviews people sent to them by agents, and then the casting director makes video, and very often the director's not even there, which is a big mistake in my opinion. And then the videos are sent to the director, and he chooses with the casting director and the producers, and of course the question of name value affects financing. If you can get so-and-so. If you get, Brad Pitt in your movie, it's easy to get the money, but even if Brad Pitt may not be he's a wonderful actor, by the way, but he may not be right for the part, but so you sort of change the movie to get So my philosophy of casting comes more back from my theater background. Number one, I always have open calls for casting, which anyone can come and meet me, not the casting director, whether they have an agent or not. Sometimes there's 500 people showing. And it's funny because they come and I ask them to bring a photograph of themselves with their resume, which most actors have, and a number that they can be reached, whether through the agent or whatever. And usually when I meet them, what I do is the same thing, is they come, and if there are 500 of them, it takes all day. And I shake their hand, and I look them in the eye, and I have I say, where are you from? And they say, oh, I'm from wherever. And if I've ever been there, I say something nice about their country, because people love it when you say something nice about their country. And there's always something nice about everyone's country to say. And then what have you, and then I take the thing and I put it in a box, and the next person comes. Well, the people are very smart, and they know that if it goes in the right box, it means it's a callback possibility. Or if it's the left box, it means they're very nice, but I don't see the possibility of a role. So they know if I throw it in the right, that's good, and we're left. So I switch every 10 minutes. So they don't know, because otherwise that's all they care about is which box it went. Bottom line is that when we did The Godfather, I did that process, and I try to always do it, but there were several people who came, had no agents, no experience, they were just there, and in The Godfather, the role, the role of Tessio, the guy, his name is Abe Vigoda. He was from Puerto Rico, Viva Puerto Rico, and who's from Puerto Rico here? Anybody? Oh, it's such a, okay. So he got the major part of Tessio in the picture from a total cold general casting. And you remember the little Italian undertaker who begins the story at the movie? He says, I believe in America, but I had a daughter, and blah, blah, blah. His name, I think, was Salvatore Corsito. He had never done anything. And he was met in that general call. And I think a couple of other small parts. So what the point is that even a general call, when they have no agents and they have no nothing, to take the director to take the time to do it can lead to some wonderful. I think that Marlon Brando used to say he thought the little undertaker in the beginning was one of the best actors he had ever seen. And he was in a call. The next way I go is I have the more submitted by agents or people who ask, oh, please see my son or my daughter. And the same situation. They come, I shake their hand, I talk to them about their lives, and I try to engage with them. And I've tried every method of casting known to man. I've tried it, because always what happens is I end up talking to them too long, and they start building up in the lobby, having coffee and seeing their friends. And I always think, I'd rather be out there with them than here, because and it's late, and you're saying if so-and-so has to leave if you don't. But I do it that way. I even did it once. I even did that. I said, it's more interesting when they're all together. So why don't we just have a casting group and everyone just come to the house, the place, and there'll be coffee and stuff, and they'll just all be seeing each other. Oh, how are you? And I'll just go amongst them and introduce myself and talk to them, and I'll do the casting that way. And I did it. It was a disaster. Because I felt like some rich guy who had to pay people to come to his party. And not only that, they knew that, oh, you stayed with him 10 minutes and you only stayed with me 2 minutes. So that meant and I've done casting where they've all just come, and all the contenders for the outsiders and all these young people. And I said, okay, you read the part of Pony Boy, and you read the part. Would get up and do it in front of all their competitors. That was pretty good. But the casting party was a disaster. So, bottom line, how do you make the decision? Is that what you're really asking me? Where's my young lady? You know how when you go, even now, to a party or somewhere and you meet a lot of people, and the next day there's one you're thinking about, not necessarily because they were cute, but there was something about them that stuck. You know what I mean? You know, even now from my experience, there are certain people I've met. Of course, some of them are these unbelievably beautiful women that come from this part of the world. But not only, some guy who has had a nice, I don't know what it is, but they stuck. That's the one to cast. Because if they stuck for you, that means they're going to stick for the other people in the audience. And that's a very good indication that that's a good casting choice, that you just kept thinking about them. What did it mean? It meant they were interesting. It meant that they had many colors that you felt. So that's the way I choose ultimately, is who can I not get out of my head. So that's a little bit about casting, I hope. It's good. I made the point recently that, you know, turtles, when they give birth to the baby turtles on the beach, these millions of baby turtles are born, and they have about, 3 minutes to make it to the sea, because above them are all these birds that are going to feast on them and do. But those little turtles, from the moment they're born, race to the sea, and enough of them survive that we still, thank God, have turtles. How do they know which direction is the sea? They just got born. They must be given some instinct to interpret, I don't know, is it the wind or God knows what, I don't know what, but they know where the sea is, because half of them don't race to the wrong direction. So human beings have that instinct too. Have you ever seen a painting of a 2-year-old that wasn't beautiful? I never have. Yet when they become 8 and they've gone to school and they have to, be the same as the other kids, they can't make those beautiful pictures anymore. So that clearly we are born not only with the instinct of the little baby turtle, but something a little more glorious which humans have, which is an additional part of instinct, which we call intuition. So keep your intuition. Keep the intuition of a child, because it will always guide you, and you can trust it. You know how dogs know by their instinct who's a bad person, who's going to hit them?
Yeah.
And they know who's nice. Little children know if you're nice or not. That's their protection. So what you have been given, if you hold on to it, if you keep it, cultivate it, and don't let it be beaten out of you, you have that instinct and that intuition by which you can judge what you admire, because you can trust it. I have always trusted my 6-year-old intuition, and I've rarely been wrong. And the only time I was wrong was when I get influenced by a group of other people who say, "You're crazy, Francis," which I have heard so many times. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that might be a guide for you. You know, when you think of it, each one of you here is a miracle. You were born. What are the odds of you being born? I don't know them mathematically, but it's 1,000,000 to 1 that you got that sperm and that egg came together in that moment, in that couple, in that place where you weren't going to be heard as a baby or killed, and you got to be here. So above all, with your work, make it personal, because there's only one of you. If you just copy the 20 of what's going around, we don't need that. We want your personal view of life, because it's logical, you are totally unique. So the little kid in you has the gift of guiding you through all your choices. You know, when I make a movie director has 10,000 decisions to make in a day, and they have to make them one after another. Well, usually when I make a movie, I've done my preparation, so I could tell you in one word or two what the theme is. Like The Godfather to me was about succession. The Conversation to me was about privacy. So when they ask you what kind of dress do you want the girl to have, long hair or short hair, usually I just know. And if I don't know, like they said to me, what kind of a coat should the guy in the conversation, he's a detective, what kind, you can have this coat, or this. And I noticed one was a transparent raincoat. And I said, well, what's the theme? Privacy. So I chose the raincoat you could see through. So number one, your instinct and your what you've cultivated among the little baby in you to make what you admire gives you that instantaneous, and it's never wrong. But when you don't know the answer, ask yourself, what is the theme of my movie? And that will help you make the decision.